Okay, like the 288, I revved that to 4K. That's a car 7,700 RPM. Again, I can't do it now because it's too cold to do that. I have to let it idle for. He couldn't drive the car, gave it to his friend, and I bought it from his friend. That car's been in storage for 25 years. 25 years. So that car's never been driven in the dirt. Probably really never been driven at all. I think it only has 2,000 miles on the car. So it's a pretty good specimen. So yeah, good question. Appreciate that. Yeah. What would I rate the Porsche out of all my cars? I have a lot of cars. I have about 20 cars. I am a Porsche fan. I like Porsches because I think they do better on the road. They do better on the track. They're just a better design car than the Ferraris. I mean, I've taken all these cars on the track. How would I rate it? I would rate it probably in the top 5 of my cars, mainly because of the significance of the car, being a supercar from the 80s. All the reasons you guys asked me about supercars before, the technology of the car, but again, getting back to the engineers, I'm going to talk about engineers a little bit, which I happen to be an engineer, is it's the best car they can do. Basically, unlimited budgets, and it just fits all that supercar ideas. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, how does the driving experience of the 959 compare to the other Group B cars? When I drive the 959, it almost feels identical to me as driving a McLaren 720. I mean, it's a 1988 car. It's so smooth. It's got double shocks on each wheel. I mean, the thing's built like an apartment building. It's just unbelievable. They built these cars. I think they put about 500,000 into each car, and they sold them for a fraction of that because people couldn't afford them. But I would say that car drives like a modern car in every way. It doesn't lean. It doesn't. It goes up bumpy roads super smooth. Compared to the F40, it's like a luxury car, a luxury sports car. So again, I've had people drive that car and drive it in, they said, this just feels like my McLaren. It's unbelievable for a 1988 car. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, the question is, what made me want to do this? Not necessarily the presentation today, but to get all these cars together. I think it's that passion my dad had, getting back to that. I think he always said, you know what, share what you have. Try to get the best and share it. My dad was really like that. When he passed away, my mom said, not going to be anybody at his funeral, you know. There was hundreds of people showed up at my dad's funeral. Just the number of people he touched, and I think that passion that he had came back to me to try to get the very best. I mean, being an engineer, I invented a lot of things. I was the chief engineer on the F-22 fighter jet, all sorts of stuff I invented. But that passion for engineering and to do the very best, I think that's why I selected these cars as the very best that engineers can do from those companies, given no money limits. Yeah. Yeah, what's my favorite type of engine to drive? We started with the V8, we're on the 6-cylinder. I would probably have to say V12. Yeah, and we're going to get to that. So there happens to be a V12 here with 4 turbos. So that's kind of hard to beat. So we're going to get to that car near the end. But a good question. I would say probably the V12, and I think, you know, Porsche kind of went back to the drawing board. They were going to do an all-electric car for Mission X. And the customer's like, you know what, we don't need an all-electric car for a supercar. Let's do something more cool with it. So I'm kind of curious to see what Porsche does. Maybe they'll bring the V10 back from the current GT. I don't know what they're going to do, but they're kind of reevaluating that. Yeah, right here. Anything besides cost of maintenance that I don't like about the car? That's a good question. You know, I can't even think of anything I don't like about the car, to tell you the truth. I'm trying to think really hard. I mean, obviously the driving experience is not as good as a modern car, but I can't knock it for that because I bought the car to get that charm back. So I don't dislike that about the car. But I would say, you know, maybe, you know, in this particular car, the suspension you just saw raising up. It took a while to raise up. That would happen in 2 seconds now. So, you know, but those are things you just, you know, that's the way it was. So I can't really say this. I put my mind back in the 80s when I drive these cars, and in that regard, how can you not dislike them? If you put your mind into 2025, then yeah, you'll pick it apart, but that's not what it's about. Yeah? Yeah, how did the 959 influence future Porsche models? That's a good question. Basically, people like, the 911, is it going to go for the next 50 years? Porsche said, yeah, it is. It's going to be, basically, this is our thing to do for the next 50 years. I think it influenced future Porsche models of four-wheel drive, for sure. I mean, there was no other cars doing four-wheel drive. The flat six being low in the chassis to get the handling and being on the rear wheels so it gets good traction. I mean, all the GT3 RS is all flat sixes in the same exact position. I would say that the styling, the styling that the cars kind of look, obviously this is a pretty unusual styling, but I would say the four-wheel drive, the flat six, proving that a flat six, water-cooled heads now for the first time. Now all the cars are water-cooled. Twin turbo, they're still making twin turbo cars. So I think it had a huge influence to say, hey, we can still make cars like this in 2025. Yeah? What? Oh yeah, question. Somebody knows about the G gear. So there is, if you look at the shifter, it says G, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's the G? Basically the G was designed to be a super low first gear where you can take off in the dirt, and they called that, I don't know what it actually stands for. Is Elliot here? He would know what the G means. Okay, I need to get Elliot. But yeah, basically it's a super low first gear. I mean, it's called G, I would just call it first, but it's lower than a normal first gear for dirt purposes. Yeah? Does the 959 work as a daily driver? I would say absolutely yes. Yeah, probably more so than any other car here. You can get in this car, super easy to get in and out of, and I would say you could use this car as a daily driver, and probably people at that time did use it for that. Yeah, good question. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So you notice the white wheels on the car, and do I think that matching the car body to the wheel, did that change? It was kind of one of the first cars to do that. A lot of people ask me, Bill, are those wheels made out of porcelain? It's like the first thing you think. It's kind of weird. But I think, yeah, the fact that this car came out with body matching wheels, I think kind of you're starting to see that in some cars now. I mean, it's kind of an unusual thing. You don't see it in a lot in modern cars. But I think people got people thinking, well, why shouldn't the wheels match the car? That's kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, this is obviously the retaliation car to the 288. Which side have I been on, Ferrari or Porsche throughout the years? I know people at the Porsche factory, I know people at the Ferrari factory, they're all good folks. I would say in terms of which side I'm on, if I'm on the track and I want to be the fastest on the track, Porsche would be my first choice. Every time over Ferrari. If I want to show a car, I do a top speed run, more towards Ferrari. The Ferraris always show better at the shows, people love them. I did a high-speed event with my Enzo, and it was the fastest car out there. We did 225 miles per hour. So in terms of high-speed events, the Ferraris are really good at that kind of stuff. But I would say, they're obviously still competing with each other, but I tend to weigh towards, again, Porsche for track every day, Ferrari more towards exotic, going fast, that kind of stuff. Good question, yeah. These 80 cars, which one do I drive the most? Probably the F40. Yeah, because people ask me to take that. Every time I go to a show, they ask me, Bill, can you take out the F40? And I think for that reason, people want to see it, and we'll get to that car. That's a fun car, especially when they open it up. So to answer your question, I would say the F40 would probably drive the most. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, how often these cars get maintained? Which part do I have to maintain the most? They all have oil changes, even if you don't drive them. You probably want to oil change them every couple of years, and no more than that. Things that break on the cars, these cars are pretty darn reliable. I haven't really had, mainly oil leaks. If you don't drive the car, you get oil leaks. That's just something you kind of have to live with. So I've fixed oil leaks over the years. So in terms of anything breaking, nothing really breaks on the car. They just get leaks. But yeah, unbelievable how reliable these cars were from the 80s. I'll take one more last question right here. Yeah, is anything interchangeable on the 959 parts versus the other cars? That's a good question. I would say there's probably, this car was pretty special when it was designed. The carbon Kevlar body, there was no other engines like that. Obviously some of the engine parts, because it was flat six, so a lot of the engine parts would be interchangeable. In terms of body parts, brakes, chassis, I would say very little would be common with any other 911 at the time. The windshield, Mike, is even different on this car. There's no other windshields like this. I asked somebody to wrap the windshield on this car. He tried it, he couldn't do it. He said, I've done every car, I couldn't wrap the windshield on this car. I'm like, well, what's up with that? And I think, I don't know if he finally did get it going. No, there's no wrap on this windshield. It says something about the contour of the windshield so unusual, it's like no other 911 I've seen. So even down to the glass in the car, this car is pretty unique in that regard. Yeah, good question. Okay, so let's go to the judges here. Get the rewards, and then we're going to ask the judges to point out the winners. Got some serious judging here. Yeah, we're gonna do something. I was able to find 3 different versions of the 959. The first one being an original, all in the original boxes. The first one being one of the ones from the 80s or the 90s, I think that one came out. Other one's a little bit newer. That's one of the Paris Dakar Rally thing, and then the last one is a little bit newer one. So we're gonna hand out some of these again in the original boxes, unopened. Ferrari's embarrassed. 959 comes out, they're like, there's no way we can make this. So Ferrari was working, Porsche was working on a car for Group B. It was kind of a modified version of the 288, kind of had a wing. They said, you know what, even that is not going to be as good as this. We need to do something fast. So Enzo Ferrari, the owner of Ferrari at the time, said, we need to do something that's just going to destroy this 959. We don't really know how to do 4-wheel drive, so we can't really do that. We don't really know how to raise the suspension. So I don't really care about that. Let's just make a car that's just going to beat 0 to 60, the top speed. We don't need the 4-wheel drive because Group B, we're not doing 4-wheel drive anymore. It's canceled in '86. So they kind of had this car already going. Group B was canceled in '86, so they didn't really have to compete off-road with the cars. So they kind of had a clean slate to work on. So they took that 288 GTO design as the Evoluzione model. You might have seen that on the web. It looks like kind of like an F40. I'm like, wow, where's that thing going? And turned it into this, and they did that in like 12 months. They basically said, you know what? We need to do something fast because we're in trouble here with this 959, and this is the F40. So you guys probably seen this F40. It's funny, when the car first came out, kids would come up to me and they say, Bill, that's kind of a square car. It's kind of like an old man's car, you know. And then Lego comes up with models, right? And then they put in Lego Land. Those same kids come up to me now and say, Bill, that's the coolest car I've ever seen. So it's just funny how people change their impressions. So F40, again, it's more of a carbon Kevlar body. Now we're talking a car that does just about 200 miles per hour. It's a US car. Special gearing on this car, quite a few things that are different than the US car. US cars, I hear about 520 horsepower. They're rated at 470. This is quite a bit more. Lower gearing, lower top speed as a result because of the lower gearing. But the European F40s did eventually exceed 200 miles per hour. We didn't want to lie here because that's the fastest they were going in the US. So this is quite an amazing car. I'm going to open it up for you guys to see. I'm going to open up the back, which is not a lot of owners know how to open up the back because that thing weighs about 100 pounds. Only about 200 so F40s built for the US market. This is a thrilling car to drive. I mean, I'll start, you'll hear it. Probably really thrilling of some of these other cars. Probably the most thrilling other than maybe the F50 in terms of the sound, acceleration. The most requested car at car shows. Very original car, original paint on the car. If you kind of look at it, you can kind of see the imperfections in the body. Enzo didn't care about that. He's just like, you know what, just make it fast. I don't care if the paint's smooth or not. You'll see all kinds of waves in the paint. You'll see drip marks in the back. They don't care about that. So I'll open it up. It's quite a sight to see it open, and we'll get it started for you guys. in here for a spare tire, but they actually made this luggage. Just a real quick story about this luggage. I took the car to Rancho Santa Fe Cars and Coffee, and this guy's jogging by me, probably in his mid-70s, t-shirt, shorts on. He goes, Bill, you know, I have luggage for an F40. I said, what? It's like so rare. He's like, oh, you know, you have luggage for an F40? He's like, yeah, I have luggage for an F40. He's like, here's my card, you know, here's my phone number. Writes it on a piece of paper. So, okay, that's cool. A week goes by, and Peter's like, did you ever call that guy? He said he's got luggage for an F40. I said, nah, you have some jogger going by. You know, you have to have luggage for an F40. So I thought, well, call him, but he got to lose. So I called the guy, and he's like, oh, I'm so happy you called me, I'll be right over. Oh, well, this is weird. I get my addresses. Let's see how this plays out. So he comes out, and he comes to my front door. And again, this guy's probably mid-70s. He's got his wife with him. His wife's about 25 years old. I'm like, okay, mate, this guy's something going on with this guy. He's got a giant Cadillac Escalade out in the driveway. He said, well, can you meet me down by your garage? I said, sure. So we meet down by the garage. He opens up the Escalade. He's taking out Ferrari luggage in the original Scudoni boxes, Testarossa luggage, F40 luggage. I mean, he put down about $100,000 worth of luggage on my driveway. I said, well, what's going on? I said, what do you want? You know, what do you want for this stuff? He's like, oh, you can just have it. I said, what do you mean I can just have it? He said, well, my brother is John Moores. He's the owner of San Diego Padres. And he had a whole bunch of Ferraris, and this stuff's just sitting in our house. We sold most of the cars. He said, just give it to somebody that wants this stuff. So I kept the F40 luggage, and we auctioned off the Wounded Warriors. You might have heard of that charity. We got $50,000 for Wounded Warriors, auctioned off luggage. So that's my luggage story of the F40, true story. Barry Moores, you can see, actually John Moores is his brother's name. He's the owner, and then he tried to turn the J into a B, but it didn't quite work. Just try to say that it's his luggage. You just can't make those stories up. Connected all that. But yeah, I don't know if you guys remember that. Some of you guys have 80s cars and Seagull tries to get you. Which is kind of crazy for this. Why would you have that? Anyway, that's what they did. So you can kind of see the intercoolers, the same as 288. They're kind of done a little bit differently. A lot of the same things. Very quickly, why is this car so much faster than 288? I kind of got into it. They got a little bit more experience with the wastegate. The wastegate's in the middle here, that's that center pipe. So when the pressure gets over a certain amount, when the turbos spool up, the wastegate has a spring in it. They figured out a new way to make the spring so that the pressure stays high, even as the car is revving it up higher. So it's way faster than 288. Again, almost 200 miles. The European cars exceeded 200. One of the first cars to go faster than 200 miles per hour. There's some debate about that. But for the most part, people think the F40 is one of the first production cars, mass-produced production cars to exceed 200 miles per hour. Special seats there, those are the original seats, original paint. So let's go to it. Yeah.
So you chatted about the iconic V8, which it sounds like didn't change a terrible difference in displacement between the 288 and this one, but they're changing the technology in this. How has the technology changed from the turbos in like a V8 here versus nowadays for like performance and reliability?
Yeah, question. So we have owner of Girly Garage here. Thanks for coming for that. The question is, how did the technology change? Why is this car different? And basically, it is, you're right, it is the same engine displacement. What they did is, they didn't have computers back then, so they had to kind of work with what can we do with springs and all sorts of stuff and vacuum lines. So they basically said, we figured out a way that this 288, even though it's got almost the same turbos, the same displacement, it's only going down to 8 PSI when it's revving close to, like, when it goes over 4,000, the pressure is dropping because we don't know how to keep the wastegate from popping. The vacuum line and the spring, we just haven't figured it out. So when they finally got a little bit more experience, they probably cheated a little bit. Maybe they bought a 959 and see what they were doing with sequential turbos. One small one, one big one. They kind of figured out, while we can make a different wastegate, we can kind of use the vacuum a little bit differently. So when the engine's revving to 4,000, 5,000, we can keep, 14 PSI, 1 bar boost. So I think it's that curve, if you look at the horsepower versus torque curve, that's way fatter on this car than a 288, even though it's the same displacement engine. Good question. Appreciate that. I know you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, right there.
So the F40 is like a legendary car. What do you think about the white body with the
Yeah, which one is that?
The white body.
The last car.
Yeah. So there's obviously the F40 is an iconic car. The question was, what do we think about that livery walk car? The cars that they made, I think they made a green one. I've seen that. Is that the green one? The white one with the red circle. I haven't seen that one. I know the green one. I know the owner of the green car. What do I think about that? What do I think about people taking these iconic cars and modifying them? You know, it's not my kind of thing. You know, I know people come up with these resto mod cars and stuff like that. I kind of think, you know what? This car has got a charm to it from the 80s. And it's like buying an old house. Why do I buy an old house? Because I like all the stuff in that house. Why do I have a Rolex from the 1960s and I have this Apple Watch? It's just a charm. And I think there's really no reason to try to turn this into a modern car or make it look better. You can always buy a car. I mean, those people are very talented people. I mean, they brought one F40 back from the dead pretty much. I think that's cool that they do that, and I always want to see Restobots continue. But my personal feeling is I want to get that feeling back in the 80s. You know, listening to disco music or whatever was going on back then. You know, just everything that everybody loved about this car. Forget everything new and bring yourself back into that when you're going in a time capsule. That's why I kind of like keeping them original like that. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so you asked me about the hood prop. It's kind of a wonky thing here, and I have to agree, it takes me a little bit of practice to get that up smoothly so I don't drop that hood and chop my head off. But yeah, I mean, it's just the way they did it back then. Like I said, Enzo at the time, you know, this is kind of new. Opening up the back end from there is the cheapest and quickest thing you can do because it didn't really have to do with the performance of the car. So let's just get something that works. So it said top 5, you know, of my collection. I mean, that's kind of a hard one to answer. I have a Porsche 918, one of my favorites, the F40. I have a 935, Porsche 935, that would probably be up there for the track, the 2019 version. The 959. I mean, those are kind of my, you know, again, all supercars that I'm picking for my supercar collection. Just cars that are just so iconic. I don't know if I put the 288 in my top 5, to be honest with you. I'm still learning about that car, but I think I like these cars because there was so much more. The engineer's just like, you know what, we're in trouble with this 959, we need to do something quick. I think that feeling and that passion in the manufacturer to do that is why I like these cars. Yeah. What's my favorite event to attend with these cars? Well, obviously I like to say the free events because the Quail tickets are outrageous. The Quail is one of my favorite events. I've met some pretty famous, I've got Brad Pitt there and people come up to me, Sammy Hagar with his F40, I know his Enzo, his white Enzo. The Quail is a pretty amazing event, the food there, the tickets are outrageous. You have to be invited to go to the Quail. It's a very exclusive event. I'll have the F50 will be at the Quail this year. But that's probably my favorite event, followed by Pebble Beach. And then when you go up to Monterey every August, I definitely, if you guys are car guys, every August, right before Pebble Beach, all the cars go down Highway 1, up and down, you can go up and see them, and then they all park on Ocean Boulevard. Oh yeah, Peter mentioned Casa Ferrari at Pebble Beach. We've been invited to that by the factory for the public. That's for the public, that's free. Actually, Casa Ferrari is free at Pebble Beach, so make sure you check that out. But yeah, I think, and if you go to Pebble Beach early, you can get in for free, and Haggerty will give you a hat. And it's cool in person until it came out, and they opened up the trunk, and I said, wow, this is like bringing back flashbacks for me. To see this car in real life. Yeah. Did you have a question? Oh yeah, right there. Yeah, does Vita get to drive the cars, and which one's her favorite? I'm gonna let her answer that.
Out of many of them, my favorite car to drive out of any of the cars that we have, well, it's actually not here. And it's a GT3 RS from 2007. And the reason I like that one the best is because it's not overpowered for me. These are all amazing to drive. And I appreciate that I can drive them and have fun stories from driving them. But that's the GT3 RS is my favorite.
Yeah, getting back to the Porsche, the feeling of driving these cars, feeling like it's made out of a single block of steel. The GT3 RS, we have the black and orange one. You guys might have seen that with the orange wheels. And that's our favorite car. One of my favorite cars too. I think just because of the driving experience, it's so solid. Those cars, GT3 RS is just great cars, I have to say. Yeah. Oh yeah, I do have a good story. Thanks for reminding me. So we drive up to the Monterey. It was at the, what was that? The Corso Italiano. We entered the F40 into that. Now Leonardo Fioravanti is the designer of this car. And he's there. And Vita was actually driving the car on the grass to get it in. And he just freaked out. He came running up to her. Leonardo Fioravanti, the guy that designed the F40, he says, "This is unbelievable." Obviously, he's a womanizer too, but he says, "This is exactly what Enzo Ferrari intended, a woman to be driving this car." I'm like, this is crazy. So, you know, we kind of met him, we became friends with him, and then a couple of years later, we see he does a biography. He comes out with a book, you know, of all the cars. He designed like 35 Ferraris. And we're paging through the book, and there's Vita in her Ferrari, and he says in the book, "I met some exotic girl by the name Vita driving a Ferrari F40 at Monterey, and she's in the book." I'm like, okay. And he's kneeling by the side of the car, like, pray to this woman driving an F40. So I totally forgot that stuff. Thanks for asking about that. Yeah, good question. Thanks for that. Yeah, right here. Yeah, do I prefer newer cars versus older cars in terms of driving? I would obviously say newer cars. They're obviously going to always drive better. A Porsche 918 I have is one of my favorite driving cars. I love the Porsche 918 even more so than some newer cars. But I think, like I said, when I'm driving these cars, I kind of forget. I kind of say, you know what, I'm not going to forget everything that the 918 does good. I'm just going to drive this car for what it was. And if you put yourself back in the 80s and say, no, I'm driving the fastest car that could be built in the 80s, I think that feeling, to bring that feeling back, is what really thrills me more than driving a new car. Because new cars are all eventually going to be electric, they're all going to be pretty much the same. You're not going to get the sounds, you're not going to get the smells, you're not going to get the charm, the little rattles, the wastegate going and you're driving, the tires spinning in first, second, and third gear. I mean, those are the things that I love about these cars. And yeah, there's always going to be, obviously a newer car is going to completely be faster, but all those things, you know, people say, hey Bill, you know, my Apple Watch, you know, does everything better than your Rolex. You know, it has GPS built in. I bought this thing for $40. I said, well, my Rolex watch, I don't know why these things go for $50,000. Do they have nothing electronic in it? But it's that feeling, it's that charm, it's a mechanical thing. It's the best somebody can make with just gears and gadgets. And I think that's where these cars are always going to be loved for that. Like going a horse or something like that. Yeah.
So when you drive these cars, do you ever feel just worried, like can you just relax while driving them, or do you just always have like anxiety about it or something?
Yeah, do I have anxiety when I drive these cars? Can I be relaxed when I drive these cars? You know, that's a good question, because when I bought these cars, they weren't as valuable as they are today. These cars are worth a lot more than I paid for these cars. But I think, you know what, I say I can always fix the car. You know, it's more about the people, the enjoyment. You know, if I was not going to drive the car, I think I'd be very anxious. I would feel like, why am I not driving my car? I didn't get it for that reason. So I still drive these cars just as much as I ever do. And just say, you know what, just be careful, and they can be fixed. You know, it's kind of an attitude I think. Yeah, right here. Yeah.
I was just wondering, so they have like carbon fiber and stuff, that's all really nice. Was that like the first that Ferrari like brought in carbon fiber? Did they have like previous models? And if it is new, how did it like change way of the process?
Yeah, good question. A question about the carbon fiber. This is actually, you can see the little yellowing occurring here on the doors. The question about carbon fiber. This is more of a carbon Kevlar car. They didn't really have too much carbon fiber at the time. That was kind of new. That came in with the F40 we'll get to. But if you look inside the car, this is a carbon Kevlar material, kind of like what they make out of bulletproof vests. Pretty modern at the time. Same material they used in the 288, because this is kind of derived a lot from the 288, so it's not a lot of the same material. But more of a carbon Kevlar material rather than look at the car, it's like, okay, it's kind of a cool car. I think when it came out, 0 to 60 in 4.0, less than actually some cars got 3 in the 3s, top speed of almost 200. I think when the car came out, people weren't even calling it a car, they were calling it a spaceship. People were paying millions of dollars for these cars in the 80s when it came out. People were like mortgaging their houses to buy these cars. I think it was just so different than anything that came out. It's just if you put yourself back in that time frame, which I keep referring to, I think it's that makes this car very special. And now that the internet's exposing those feelings, you can go back into an old Car and Driver. I totally recommend going into the Car and Driver magazine when this car was introduced. In person until it came out, and they opened up the trunk, and I said, "Wow, this is like bringing back flashbacks for me to see this car in real life." Yeah. Did you have a question? Oh yeah, right here. Yeah, does Vita get to drive the cars, and which one's her favorite? I'm gonna let her answer that.
Out of many of them, my favorite car to drive out of any of the cars that we have, well, it's actually not here. And it's a GT3 RS from 2007. And the reason I like that one the best is because it's not overpowered for me. These are all amazing to drive. And I appreciate that I can drive them and have fun stories from driving them, but that's the GT3 RS is my favorite.
Yeah, getting back to the Porsche, the feeling of driving these cars, feeling like it's made out of a single block of steel. The GT3 RS, we have the black and orange one. You guys might have seen that with the orange wheels. That's our favorite car. One of my favorite cars too. I think just because of the driving experience, it's so solid. Those cars, GT3 RS, is just great cars, I have to say. Yeah. Oh yeah, I do have a good story. Thanks for reminding me. So we drive up to the Monterey. It was at the, what was that? The Corso Italiano. We entered the F40 into that. Now, Leonardo Fioravanti is the designer of this car. And he was there. And Vita was actually driving the car on the grass to get it in. And he just freaked out. He came running up to her. Leonardo Fioravanti, the guy that designed the F40, he says, "This is unbelievable." Obviously, he's a womanizer too, but he says, "This is exactly what Enzo Ferrari intended, a woman to be driving this car." I'm like, this is crazy. So, you know, we kind of met him, we became friends with him, and then a couple of years later, we see it in, he does a biography. He comes out with a book, you know, of all the cars. He designed like 35 Ferraris. And we're paging through the book, and there's Vita in her Ferrari, and he says in the book, "I met some exotic girl by the name Vita driving a Ferrari F40 at Monterey, and she's in the book." I'm like, okay. And he's kneeling by the side of the car, like, pray to the woman driving an F40. So I totally forgot that stuff. Thanks for asking about that. Yeah, good question. Thanks for that. Yeah, right here. Yeah, do I prefer newer cars versus older cars in terms of driving? I would obviously say newer cars. They're obviously going to always drive better. A Porsche 918 I have is one of my favorite driving cars. I love the Porsche 918 even more so than some newer cars. But I think, like I said, when I'm driving these cars, I kind of forget. I kind of say, you know what, I'm not going to forget everything that the 918 does good. I'm just going to drive this car for what it was. And if you put yourself back in the 80s and say, no, I'm driving the fastest car that could be built in the 80s, I think that feeling, to bring that feeling back, is what really thrills me more than driving a new car. Because new cars are all eventually going to be electric, they're all going to be pretty much the same. You're not going to get the sounds, you're not going to get the smells, you're not going to get the charm, the little rattles, the wastegate going as you're driving. the tires spinning in first, second, and third gear. I mean, those are the things that I love about these cars. And yeah, there's always going to be, obviously a newer car is going to completely be faster, but all those things, you know, people say, hey Bill, you know, my Apple Watch, you know, does everything better than your Rolex. You know, it has GPS built in. I bought this thing for 40 bucks. I said, well, my Rolex watch, I don't know why these things go for 50,000. Do they have nothing electronic in it? But it's that feeling, it's that charm, it's a mechanical thing. It's the best somebody can make with just gears and gadgets. And I think that's where these cars are always going to be loved for that. Like owning a horse or something like that. Yeah.
So when you drive these cars, do you ever feel just worried, like can you just relax while driving them, or do you just always have like anxiety about it or something?
Yeah, do I have anxiety when I drive these cars? Can I be relaxed when I drive these cars? You know, that's a good question, because when I bought these cars, they weren't as valuable as they are today. These cars are worth a lot more than I paid for these cars. But I think, you know what, I say I can always fix the car. You know, it's more about the people, the enjoyment. You know, if I was not going to drive the car, I think I'd be very anxious. I would feel like, why am I not driving my car? I didn't get it for that reason. So I still drive these cars just as much as I ever do. And just say, you know what, just be careful, and they can be fixed. You know, that's kind of an attitude I think. Yeah, right here. Yeah.
I was just wondering, so they have like carbon fiber and stuff, that's all really nice. Was that like the first that Ferrari like brought in carbon fiber? Did they have any previous models? And if it is new, how did it like change the way of the built?
Yeah, good question. A question about the carbon fiber. This is actually, you can see the little yellowing occurring here on the doors. The question about carbon fiber. This is more of a carbon Kevlar car. They didn't really have too much carbon fiber at the time. That was kind of new. That came in with the F40 we'll get to. But if you look inside the car, this is a carbon Kevlar material, kind of like what they make out of bulletproof vests. Pretty modern at the time. Same material they used in the 288, because this is kind of derived a lot from the 288, so it's not a lot of the same material. But more of a carbon Kevlar material rather than look at the car, it's like, okay, it's kind of a cool car. I think when it came out, 0 to 60 in 4.3, less than actually some cars got 3 in the 3s, top speed of almost 200. I think when the car came out, people weren't even calling it a car, they were calling it a spaceship. People were paying millions of dollars for these cars in the 80s when it came out. People were like mortgaging their houses to buy these cars. I think it was just so different than anything that came out. It's just, if you put yourself back in that time frame, which I keep referring to, I think it's that makes this car very special. And now that the internet's exposing those feelings, you can go back into an old Car and Driver. I totally recommend going into the Car and Driver magazine when this car was introduced and see what.
Thank you for watching my San Diego Automotive Museum Decades of Trifecta video. This is video number 3 of the Ferrari F40. You may also like to watch the other 5 cars in this series. I also have a video of an interview with 1988 BMW M5 and a 1995 Porsche 911 Carrera. Have a great day.